And thank you again for joining us on PM Express tonight. And as you may have noticed, since the IMF decision was unveiled by the government of Ghana, it seemed to have triggered what is now very clearly labor unrest. And what is emerging now is clear. The workers believe somehow that because of our past history with the IMF and how they're very strict with employment and the labor unions and the labor generally and the workforce and the compensation package. Well, if government is beginning conversations with the IMF for a bailout, the workers seem to suggest that this is the time to warn government that they will not tolerate any conditionality, any program that will affect their welfare as workers based on previous experiences with the IMF. And so now we are having a major issue now to deal with. Government is having to deal with a major issue with worker agitation. Let's break it down for you. The first to hit the ceiling, the fun, is the teacher unions, pre-tertiary teacher unions. And this pretty much is unprecedented because rarely have we seen all four unions in the pre-tertiary sector of education call a strike at the same time. Normally you will see NAT go alone, you will see Nagrat go alone, you will see TEU go alone or CCT, or you see a combination of some, but not all four together. Yesterday, just days after government said we're going to the IMF, they said, we've had enough. We're calling a strike, withdrawing all our services. It's no coincidence that they decided to make this announcement 3 days after government had announced they are going to the IMF. It's no coincidence. And I will explain to you shortly why it is not a coincidence. Because the TUC gives us the best indication yet why we possibly, and government must brace itself for a bigger problem with labor unrest in the coming days, weeks, and months. So NAT is on strike. And this effectively means that the entire pre-tertiary sector has been shut down, will grind to a halt. And today we've seen the evidence of this. There's no teaching and learning happening across the country. Students are going home. Of course, the GS has said the head teachers should step in. But we all know that is impossible, right? Without the teachers in the classroom, this is impossible. Unless this is dealt with immediately as a national crisis, we're going to have a big problem with education at that level in this country because your kids will not have teachers in the classroom to teach them. And as you're hearing tonight from the minority members on the Education Committee in Parliament, government should simply close out the schools whilst they resolve this immediately. So that's the first major problem that this IMF thing has triggered. And this IU says there's no coincidence that the timing it's happening at this particular time. Why do I say so? Because again, we are seeing that following on the heels of the teachers, we've seen today the Union of Professional Nurses and Midwives have also joined demand, also asking for COLA. Remember that all these teacher unions are asking for COLA. That is the cost of living allowance. They say, look, cost of living has become too excruciatingly painful to bear. You need to cushion us. And they're asking for 20% cost of living allowance. And the key question you need to ask yourself is, can a government that has thrown in the towel to say, listen, we can't do this anymore. We are essentially broke. We need a bailout. IMF give us up to $3 billion because we need that balance of payment help urgently. Can a government that had said that had gone to the IMF, afford 20% COLA for thousands and thousands of workers? It's a key question to ask, and we'll ask the workers' unions when they join us. And then you have Utag. Utag also issued a statement yesterday, and they will not mince words about what this IMF means for us. They are clear that they believe that in the homegrown policies, should be the way to go, developed by home-based experts and implemented by home-based practitioners. Because they fear, don't leave this to the IMF. We must fix this problem, this economic crisis, ourselves. That's Utag, University Teachers Association of Ghana. They are already sounding the alarm bells. And they end by stating this: Utag will not tolerate any IMF conditionality that negatively affects the existing agreements between government and Utag to improve the conditions of service of its members. I told you that it's no coincidence that we're seeing all these worker unions voicing very vociferously their demands. Utag, remember, Utag, they went on strike for a long, long time, threatened to shut down the universities, and they sat with government, agreed a package. They are warning government, don't come and tell me IMF is here so you can't keep your agreement. That's the warning to government already as government begins to sit down with the IMF, and coincidentally, the first meeting with the IMF is tomorrow. So the workers are timing this. They are warning government, as you go into this meeting tomorrow, bear in mind that you have an agreement with us. Don't go to the IMF and tell the IMF you can't implement our agreement, because we won't tolerate it. The nurses are asking the same. The teachers, they've already said, even before you start, we are calling off, we are withdrawing our services. Then today, in addition to these, today, we've heard from the senior staff of universities across the country. So the Utag is warning. The senior staff has also issued a statement. And there is also another statement from another working union tonight. And so this is becoming a groundswell of warnings to the government. And some of them are giving firm ultimatums because for example, the nurses, they've given government up until next week to pay the COLA, or they also withdraw their services. I mean, the senior staff is also making the same demands of the government. So that is pretty serious indeed. Then the TUC comes in, and TUC is the mother of all the unions, right? The Trade Union Congress, all the unions, the mother of them. Listen to what they say. They say government decision to go to the IMF is tragic and sad. That's their position on this. Then they say that they go to history. The last time we went to the IMF, there was a freeze on public sector employment. That's a TUC telling government why they don't like this. Then they say government did not consult its social partners before engaging the IMF. In other words, the TUC is telling government, before you decided to go, you should have consulted your social partners, including the workers. You say, government, you didn't do that. Then again, they make the point, and this is very important for me, this point here, that the 4% and 7% base pay increases for 2021-2022 was agreed on condition, and there was a condition there, that government will continue to employ young people into the public service. Why are they saying this? Because if you check historically, one of the things that IMF tends to do when they get in is to say to our government, and our government will present a program, but they will insist that include in that program a net freeze on employment. The TUC is telling government, oh, listen, we've already agreed that you continue to employ people. So don't go and sit with the IMF and then agree like you did the last time in 2015 that you put a net freeze on employment. Okay, so what really happened in 2015 that is possibly agitating the worker unions, right? Because remember that what is happening today is on the vacuum. We've been to the IMF 16 times already. So the workers, they know what has happened in the past. But let's take the last time we went to the IMF and the things that the IMF and government agreed to do. Payroll cleanup, that will affect workers. Secondly, bring wage bill to revenue ratio down from 53 to 55%. Wage bill must come down. That means what we are paying the workers must come down. If the IMF insists that we should do this, how do you pay 20% COLA and still reduce your wage bill? That's a question I need to ask. That is 2015. If the IMF takes that template and government agrees to it, can government reduce this? Maybe not as steep as this, but something within this range. Already, I'll tell you what the wage bill is currently. Can government accommodate the 20% that the workers are asking for COLA? Third thing they did in 2015, freeze public sector employment. That's what 2015, that's what happened. You see how this will immediately clash with this TUC demand and notice to government? That we've agreed, we agreed to 4 and 7% on condition that government will continue to employ young people into public service. If you take this and compare it to what happened in 2015, there was a freeze on public sector employment. Which means that young people might not get in there. So that's why the TUC is warning. So that's 2015. That's why the workers are saying, we've tasted this before. We didn't like it. So they're agitating. Now, the 2015 program the specific measures, again, and this also border on the workers, right? And I'm trying to isolate the 2015 areas that the workers are paying attention to now. IMF says manage your wage bill. Single spine salary structure was a key problem for the IMF and the government then. IMF said change it or do something about it. Again, extend suspension of salary payments to employees without SNIT. I remember this caused a lot of pain for some of the workers because there was a lot of confusion when this happened. Monthly validation of staff nominal payroll before Controller and Accountant General pay salaries, and then large-scale public audit of payroll management system to identify irregularities and seek the recovery of any fund unduly paid. And I don't think that any worker or the unions will oppose this. We might see this again in the IMF program that we are currently going into. Now, but the government released a very detailed statement today, and they make some assurances to the workers as far as this is concerned. And the government was giving us a sense of what they will do in the negotiations with the IMF. And this is what government said on that question of employment. It said the decision on employment is usually informed by economics, including the sustainability of the public sector wage bill. And so that isn't too reassuring. But in that, too, the government said, yes, we know what has happened with the IMF in the past, but there's no one size fit all. They make that point in the statement today, government. And so they're expecting, don't use what has happened before as a basis to judge what will happen now. That's the government's point to the workers. I wonder what the workers' unions are saying about it. Do they accept that this may be different? They are joining me, so we'll get a sense from them pretty shortly. Now, this is the picture the IMF will look at. And the first thing the IMF will do when they touch down, and I understand they touched down already. They touched down already tonight, and tomorrow they'll begin a meeting. The first thing they'll do is to open our books. When they do, they'll see this. This is scary. Total revenue, 100 billion. Compensation of employees is 35.8 billion. Compensation alone, right? And then you come to interest payments, 37 billion. What is left? 27 billion. So the workers are taking a lot. The IMF will look at this and say, goodness me, this is unsustainable. We need to do something about this. The question is, what will they do about it? And how will that affect the workers? Is a fundamental question. But the IMF will see these documents. They will see these numbers. And when they see the numbers, they will be alarmed. And they'll say, well, if you want to manage the current economic crisis, you don't have money, you're nearly broke, you have to fix this problem with a compensation. Because we can't afford not to pay our interest payments. We can't afford to default. So as for that, I doubt they will touch. Because remember, the IMF itself will be giving us a loan, right? So they can't afford to touch that. One of the things that historically they've always touched, or they've always asked government to do something about, compensation. Compensation. I've showed you that already. And then Ghana's, again, let's do this comparison. The first quarter outlook. This is the Ghana's 2020 revenue generation. If you're generating enough revenue, you have too much problem, but we are not. Total revenue is 1.6 billion. This is the first quarter. That's what revenue has been. Amount spent on compensation alone in the first quarter of this year, out of 16 billion that we've collected so far, is 7.6 billion. Let's pay attention to that. So we are spending a lot of money just this year, 2020, in the midst of the crisis. We've collected 16 billion provisional from the Finance Ministry's fiscal data. We paid 7.6 billion of that to the workers, and we spent again interest payment. As for that, we can't do anything about, right? 10 billion. I'm saying this because that's a reality. So government might go here, because IMF say possibly go here. Can you do something about this number? 7.6 billion, right? What is left of what we collected in the first quarter of this year alone, after we pay the workers and we paid our interest, our debt, is 1.5 billion. Tell me if the IMF will look at this and say, do something about this. And that's why the workers are talking. We'll talk to them very shortly. And then look at, whilst we're having this conversation about what is possible and what is not with the workers are saying, if you look at this table, IMF must also be shown this table. Cost of living indicators. The IMF must see the table because look at what the workers are beginning to bear. They are bearing, this is fuel prices, by the way. This is, the green is diesel, the blue is petrol. Workers are paying this. Look at the diesel cost. 14.59 is currently what they are paying. 14 cedis, 59 pesos. Petrol, 11. 0.59. Look at the trajectory. Look at 2022 alone. Look at the jump they've seen. Look at the jump that the workers are beginning to see. The IMF should be aware of this. The workers will tell them, yeah, we get the picture you are painting with this. We get the picture. We get this picture, right? We get this picture. Yeah, you're paying us a lot. But please also consider the times you are in. This is unprecedented times with all the amounts you're paying for fuel and other things that is killing us. And then look at this. Cost of living indicator. Transport fares have gone up 35%. Many of these poor workers, the teachers, they use public transport. And they've had to pay 35%. 35% more for transport fares have jumped. So how are they going to take this if you don't give me cola? Right? If you don't give me cola, how do I bear 35% jump? IMF must see this too. And then, this is the one I like. I like this particular part of the graph because this is 2014. And this table here is talking about the increase in base pay of public sector workers since 2010. Now, in 2014, the year we began our negotiations with the IMF, government paid COLA that year. And this is comparable to this year because we're beginning a conversation with IMF. Paid COLA of 10% in 2014. So the workers are possibly looking at this history and saying, well, you paid COLA in 2014 when you began your IMF consideration. That time too, we're in the crisis. Why can't you pay COLA in 2022 when you're beginning same conversation with the IMF, right? 10%. But of course, now they are asking twice more, 20%. Well, the economic dynamics were different then and now. So can you make that comparison? But then you come to 2015, the year we got the deal, there was a base pay increase of 15%. So if you are extrapolating, that will be next year. Hopefully that's when we are hoping that the deal will be concluded with the IMF. Can government give the workers 15%? Remember, the workers are asking for what? More than 20% increase in their salaries. Why? Because of the exchange, the depreciation, sorry, not depreciation per se, but the issue with inflation. The issue with inflation. The inflation is above 27%. The workers say, give us something close that will recoup what we are getting. So 15% is what they got in 2015. Will they get anything close to this year? They are asking for more than 20%. Can government do that? Because historically, we've seen that in the years of crisis, government still gave an increase. So workers are saying, well, we still want that now, but we want more because of what we are facing. So that's the story. Now the workers are joining me, and I have all of them joining me from Utag, from Ghana Medical Association, from Nagrat, also joining me tonight. I want to speak to them about the realities I've just painted for you, because it's pretty bleak, I get it. I wonder, are they factoring in everything I've just said about where we are tonight with the negotiations beginning tomorrow in what they are doing with the strikes that have been called? I really want to tap into that, and I want to really get a sense of, now that we are going to the IMF, would that change anything about what they are asking for? Because to say you are going to the IMF is an admission that we are in crisis, right? So does that change anything? I know Njo Kabono has been here before, and we've talked about COLA. That was before the IMF. I know Utag has been here before. We've talked about their issues. That was before the IMF. Does that change anything now? They are joining me after this break. Stay with me. My guest tonight, Njo Kabono, is the president of the National Association of Graduate Teachers. They called a nationwide strike yesterday, and they are on strike. The classrooms, as we've been around today, show that it's pretty empty. Kids are there, the children are there, but there are no teachers to teach them. He joins me. Dr. Sari Asante Ano is the National Utag General Secretary. They issued a statement yesterday, and I brought that to you at the beginning of that show when I did my take on this, and they are very clear on this matter. We won't tolerate any matter with the IMF that may affect our agreement that we have with you. He joins us He joins us tonight. Titus Bayo is with the General Secretary of the GMA, and he joins us on right now. I mean, their counterparts, the nurses, have already issued a statement demanding cola. We've not heard from the doctors, so I presume that they are fine. They don't need cola at all. We'll get his thoughts on this matter pretty shortly. And then we'll speak to the TUC. The TUC's Deputy General Secretary, the mother of all unions, will join us. Joshua Ansah will also join us tonight on this matter. I want to start with you, Mr. Angel Kabonu. Since you called your strike yesterday, I wonder if there's been any movement to try and resolve the issues that you raised. Fundamentally, 20% COLA. Have you received a call from the government?
Well, the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations has invited us to a meeting tomorrow in the ministry to discuss the issue. But unfortunately, already the Deputy Minister for Employment and Labor Relations, Reku Brube, is already poisoned the atmosphere with a lot of false indicating that the government paid teachers 9 months whilst they were at home. And that is not accurate. Let me tell you that after the schools were reopened after COVID, teachers have not had holidays. Teachers were in continuous work to make up for lost time. The teaching contact period has been increased from 40 minutes to 1 hour. Lessons that used to end at 1:30 is now ending at 3:30 and in some schools 4:30. We have decided to make all the sacrifices to make up without any remuneration at all. School administration, especially headmasters, senior house mistresses and masters, housemasters and house mistresses, and the kitchen staff have been in school continuously throughout the year without any break or holiday. And I'm so shocked that the Deputy Minister of Employment of all people is not aware of this development. The atmosphere is already poisoned before tomorrow's meeting.
But you will attend the meeting?
We will attend the meeting tomorrow, and we will make these points clear to him for him to withdraw that political statement he made in front of party fanatics.
Let me ask you for clarity. The announcement to go to the IMF was last week, Friday, if I'm not mistaken. Did that play any role in your decision to make the announcement to strike yesterday?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
The call for COLA began as far back as February. The TUC Secretary General on the May Day speech, representing organized labor, made that call before the President of the Republic to use his executive powers to grant COLA to public sector workers. So to link our call to IMF is very wrong, because until just about a few days, the government was still on high horse, indicating his decision never to go to the IMF. So the IMF is not afloat. Some of us do not like the IMF. We don't see IMF as a solution. But what we are doing is reflecting the current economic situation and how it afflicts us, IMF or no IMF.
Yeah, let me bring in Dr. Santiano. Dr. Santiano, Utag has been clear. You have, in your statement, made it very clear that you will not tolerate any conversation with the IMF that will affect your standing agreements with government. Explain to me what that means. Do you have an agreement with government, and what does that agreement say?
Okay, thank you very much, and good evening to your listeners. I think from your expose and listening to my senior brother Kabonu, I think the stories are similar, because most of the unions had some form of promises. So, for example, Utag in March, stopgap measure that we got from government. And so as a labor union, we had to convince our members. And one of the main factors that our members took into consideration was a review of the single spine. So it was the hope, and we are still hoping that by the end of the year, actually we all labor also met in Pau, so most of the people who gathered here this evening were also there. And it was unanimously agreed, and the minister was also there, the president was there, the vice president was there. So what Utag is saying is that if our members got something in interim, and that the proper review is going to be done, which will affect all public workers, then irrespective of what is happening now, our purchasing power or our disposable income is already very low because of the inflation that's currently ongoing, as you brilliantly presented. And so it is important that government factors these conditions or peculiarity regarding Ghana and the labor front, so that it does not or go back on its promises to the public workers, or in this case, Utah.
But I'm curious, so, why are you afraid that the agreement you have with government might be affected by the IMF conversation?
Well, from your own presentations and we all have the data available. We know how the IMF policies work, where you have to restructure certain aspects of your economy. But it's important from your presentation, you talked about revenue and then how they would want revenue to increase. But you cannot increase revenue when you take away labor, because they are also giving some form of productivity to the economy. So it's not that we are afraid, but we are saying that these are conversations that we have already had, and can confidently confirm it's not only Utah. All the other unions have had some form of backdoor engagement with government. And so for you to wake up another day and then you hear that, for example, because of IMF, I cannot do A, B, and C, whilst our disposable income is still going down, that would be definitely unacceptable.
I mean, so, Dr. Bayo, to be fair, you haven't issued any statement. I mean, to be fair, all the other unions have. You haven't. I haven't heard you on COLA. Should I take it then that the Ghana Medical Association, you don't have any issues with COLA?
Good evening, Evans, and good evening to our viewers and listeners, and to my co-panelists. Indeed, the GMA has issues with COLA, and the GMA is part of a larger group that has also requested COLA, and that is the forum of which we are part. The Ghana Registered Nurses and Midwives are part, ClockSAC and the rest are all part. And we have made a request for COLA under that umbrella. It is the reason why we have found it prudent not to go outside that group to make a separate demand. So we have also requested for COLA in principle.
Okay, but as we stand now, we've gone to the IMF. And as I've just illustrated at the beginning, historically, this is one of the areas the IMF will always touch. Does that give you cause for concern at all?
Definitely, it does give a cause for concern. We have seen it in the past, and I think from all the positioning of all labor unions, the past is informing that when the IMF comes in, the greatest fear or concern for labor is job losses, freeze on employment, and inappropriate or inadequate compensation for work done by labor. And I find it an easier option for government and for the IMF. And if you look at the data now, government is spending more on interest payment than it is spending on wages. And so if government and the IMF would only look at cutting down wage bill, instead of looking at how to reduce the interest we are paying, which will come from the fundamental question, why are we borrowing so much? Why can't we increase our own productivity so that we increase the GDP in this country and minimize the borrowing? And look at just reducing wage bill and use these three things I've talked about, which is freezing employment, not employing new people, which are all part of agreement that government already has with labor, which is not compensating people appropriately. We agreed to very insignificant increases in salaries on the condition that government will continue to employ people. And so if you use that to reduce wage bill, and then if you do not compensate people well, then that is a very easy and cheap solution. Truth is that even if you wanted to tackle wage bill, the angle that labor thinks that government should be looking at in talks with IMF, and now look at that part, is the inequalities in salary, the disparities. One CEO in the public sector salary can pay COLA for an entire school of teachers, an entire hospital of doctors. So why is that IMF not going to, and the 2015 program failed to address that inequality, disparity in salary. Anytime we talk about the wage bill, we punish the low earners on the salary or on the wage bill and favor the high earners in an attempt to reduce wage bill. This is what labor is determined to resist this time. And I would admonish the IMF that if they want to look at this and want to find solution, they should focus on the inequalities in salary or the disparities, the largesse that some people are taking so much that the ordinary worker is, the little that that person is taking is being gleaned away and those largesse are not touched. And they should look at the interest because it's far way above any wage bill. If you look at this year's data and if you look at the previous data that you have presented. So these are the hard issues that they should tackle and not punish the poor worker.
I mean, Mr. Kabono, so you are on strike. Do you accept, however, that the decision to go for a bailout changes the game substantially about our ability, the government's ability, to pay 20% COLA? Do you accept that that will have to be factored into the conversation, our ability to pay when you're seeking a bailout?
Well, this is not the first time. Well, in the first place, in principle, we are against the government going for a bailout from the IMF. I think internal discipline is the problem in this country, and we don't need an external headmaster to come and force you or compel you to be a disciplined manager of the economy. So we are not in favor of government going for IMF. However, from the days of General Rawlings, we went for IMF bailout. President Kufuor, we went for IMF bailout. Atamios, we went for IMF bailout. John Mahama, we went for IMF bailout. Check, all these regimes paid, negotiated with labor, and paid and came up with increased salaries. So the history does not support the argument that the moment you go for an IMF program, you cannot determine wages based on the economic situation of your people.
In fact, in 2014, you got 10% COLA. That was the year we were negotiating with the IMF. The year after, you got 50% increase in base pay.
Yes, but then the reason for which we got 10% COLA are different from the condition for which we are demanding 20% COLA. The times are totally different. So the fact that we go for IMF bailout should not stop government to fulfill its obligation to its workers. And I agree very well with Titus that let us segregate the salary sheet in this country and see what percentage of people take the high chunk of salaries in this country. When a CEO of a company takes about 2 times the amount of money the president takes, with a lot of allowances and benefits, travel allowance, entertainment allowance, benefits that some of us on single span have really never heard before. And then you have a driver in the public service taking home 600 Ghana cedis at the end of the month. So if government is talking about a huge wage bill, let us interrogate the wage bill. Some of these highfalutin, politically jaundiced programs that are being organized, then you collect about 100,000 people, you come and give them money, and after 1 year, you dismantle the program, and the people even begin to agitate because you are not giving them sustainable employment. Let us interrogate where the monies go on the wage bill, and you will be shocked the percentage of people who take the high chunk of money on the wage bill.
Okay, so you're saying that in any review of the salary structure right now should focus on the high earners.
Yes, and in any case, why do we have one country with different groups of people having different salary structures? For example, why should we have Article 71? I don't know which article we belong to. We also belong to a certain article. I've forgotten the number of the article. But why should we have Article 71 separate from those who are on single spine? Some people are not on single spine. We are all workers. So if we are not able to bring everybody on board, those who are on Article so and so 71 and co will not even empathize with those who are on the doldrums of the salary scale in this country. No, people work very hard. People are even overworking. I can assure you, go to Kolebu where doctor is, and they can prove to you what work they do. And then we also welcome the review, but the review has to be done honestly. Salary review should not be done with the intention of shortchanging workers. Already, the review committee is a bad and negative starter where you try to pull out worker unions and their representatives and bring in people who are not on the single spine to go and review single spine. Definitely, we can already see and suspect that the objective of the committee is to shortchange people who are on the single spine instead of honestly bringing representatives of labor unions who are on single spine to come and sit down, judge, negotiate a well-structured single spine pay structure in those countries. The moment it starts like that, you are already aware of the objectives of government. And let me assure you, any outcome of that committee, for us, we see that committee as a failure ab initio. Any outcome of that committee that do not reflect our needs and our demands, I can assure you, will be rejected.
I mean, Dr. Asanteano, your agreement that you mentioned earlier, when was it? When were you? When did the agreement say that it will be implemented? Was it this year? Which month? Do you have a specific time frame? Do you agree on a specific time frame for implementation?
Are you talking about the single spine review?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about what you communicated in your statement yesterday, that you have an agreement and you don't want it touched because of the IMF. That agreement, when is it kicking in?
Yes, so I think it's basically what we are all saying, because when you listen to Titus or Kabonu, all these unions, we've had engagement with government.
Okay.
For us also to call off our strike in March, we had also similar engagement. And just like all these other unions were promised, we were also promised that this is just interim. The big one is that by December, we'll be able to put you on your rightful place. And then come January, for all public workers, we would be seeing something that we have yearned for all these years. So this is what happened. And from what we are discussing now, it's obvious that, like we stated in our communique, we need what we term the all-inclusive aspect. Because when you form a committee and then you just decide to pick people who are aligned in a particular way, you don't achieve anything. And the thing with labor is that you don't want the point where they are dictated and then everybody starts to go on the streets. I've asked this question severally. You are going for a certain package, but when you get the package and the people that are supposed to be working are not working, what are you going to do? It is important that these concerns from all these unions, including Utag, are addressed adequately. And it will start with we relying on experts, because when we ignore the experts, and experts I don't mean from a party A or only party B, but it should be all inclusive. And we sit down and we address all these conditions. If you ask my colleague panelists, most of these labor union leaders and these labor unions are very understanding. If you look at conditions that doctors work, teachers, sometimes some of the villages you cannot mention. In the universities, if you look at the numbers, you'll be surprised. One lecturer is handling over 500 students. And we did that during COVID, we did that after COVID. It's not like these people are not well-meaning Ghanaians. We are. It's a need that, from your graph you showed, I mean, how are these people going to afford going to work? That's a question we need to address.
Okay, I mean, so the titles though, if you look at the last time we went to the IMF, as far as the workers and the wage bill is concerned, this is what the IMF told us to do, and we did. Payroll cleanup, bring wage bill down to revenue ratio of 35, from 35% to 35%, freeze public sector employment. Assuming that that is part of the conversation going forward now, would you accept any of these? Freezing public sector employment, payroll cleanup, reducing the wage bill?
So that is a rather simplistic view of things. If you want to reduce the wage bill to a revenue percentage, why do we assume that the only way to do that is to cut the wage bill? It's a matter of fractions. So why don't we increase the revenue? And we can increase the revenue by increasing productivity. That would also make that percentage still possible.
But you raise a very important point. You raise a very important point.
Yes. So if you go for only cutting down the wage bill, then you've done nothing. You are having two sides of a scale. You want to improve it. And the cheaper and easier option that governments go for is just reduce employment. You don't need to freeze public sector employment to improve that percentage that we are talking about. You can improve productivity by creating the enabling environment, employing the right caliber of people, equipping them, monitoring them, and getting them to work. And you can still achieve the same thing. And so for, I would not, and I think no labor union will be happy accepting a blank freeze on public sector employment. Already without a freeze, look at the unemployment situation. Look at the security implications of that. People are graduating from universities and getting no jobs. And so if you then come in with a blanket freeze for how many years, how does that help you improve the situation? Rather, I think the focus should be how do we improve productivity to ensure that we improve that percentage of reduction that we want.
Okay.
And as for the freeze, it is a no to any labor union. We have accepted several sacrifices because we did not want that freeze. And I think that was made clear in the TUC statement. And that is the same thing that all of us are echoing. Organized labor.
But why don't you want the freeze? I mean, it's a net freeze. I mean, why should we employ more when we don't have the money? Just keep those you have already.
Evans, I'm not sure you really mean what you are saying, or
it's a simple question. I mean, you are in crisis. Why would you employ more? Why would you want to add on to the labor force? Why don't you just keep what you have there?
Why are we making it sound like when you just add on people and pay them money for no work done? Unless it's politically engineered programs that do not bring any productivity. For any well thought through program, if you look at staffing norms, if you go to the University of Ghana and look at the number of students, you have created free SHS, several students are coming in, and you say you will not employ any new lecturers? Are you then serious? What kind of quality of product are you coming out with? I'm a lecturer in the medical school. Our intakes are doubling. When I was in medical school, our class size was less than 100. Government was taking 65 students, 70 students. I am teaching a class now about 200 students. And you say you will not increase employment in the university? Is that a very productive way to go? So I think we should answer the hard questions. The hard questions are all these students coming in are paying some sort of fees. They are paying user fees. They are paying some fees to the government. That is productivity. Foreign students are coming in. They are bringing in hard currency to the system. So there is productivity in there. You cannot tell me you are freezing the employment of a doctor. When we look at our doctor-to-patient ratio in this country, we have whole districts without doctors. Would that be productivity? When we are talking of universal health coverage, if you will not employ the nurse, when you have facilities without nurses, would that be productivity? So I think we should be looking more at the productivity angle. And that is what we discussed at the KOU conference. Unfortunately, as has been alluded to by one of the labor unions, government took this decision to IMF without consulting stakeholders and partners, social partners like labor. and they are going for the negotiation again without consulting any labor union to get our input. And it's always the same thing. We ask for review of single spine. You decide to set up a committee without the ultimate beneficiaries or partakers of single spine. How do you bring in people who are not on single spine to review a policy for me who is on single spine? I mean, so you just cannot understand the thinking process.
Mr. Carbon, I see you wanted to say something.
I agree perfectly with Dr. Titus and my brother from Utah. You see, the country is even not in a state of full employment. You need to just move outside Accra and go to the northern regions, where one teacher is superintending over a whole school. And you see this and you wonder why somebody thinks that we are overemployed in this country.
But isn't that a distribution problem? That there are glut of teachers in the south? Just send them there and redistribute. Why do you want to employ more?
Are you saying that the teachers in the south are not having classroom to teach? Let me take you to Kaijana, around La area, and I'll take you to a classroom where we have over 70 students in one class. And this reflects itself in different aspects of our society. The country is not in full employment. Are you saying that we have enough policemen in this country? With all this armed robbery and insecurity situation that we have, are you saying we have enough policemen in this country? Are you saying that we are in a country where fire is burning in Adenta and the fire tenders are just in Legon, and we cannot even have a system where or enough personnel to be able to help the people who are being afflicted by the fire? It looks as if we are in a rush to satisfy political sentiments. We are not sitting down with stakeholders, with labor, with academia, so that we intellectually come up with systems that are operative in this country. So, for example, when you go and take loan, and you come and use the loan to pay a politically motivated program, and because the majority of people in that program are political party adherents, so even participating in the program for which the loan was taken, they don't go. And because they are party adherents, you have to pay them anyway. At the end of the day, what is the benefit of these politically motivated programs on national development? So there is the need for us to have that conversation. Look at what we need when we talk about employment, which areas we will have to improve, which areas we will have to review, which areas we will have to develop. When we talk about agric, sometimes when I listen to the Minister of Agric, I realize that he is in his own world and the people are in a different world. Are we saying that the whole and cutlass agricultural activity that our old folks are engaged in is the way to go? Can we create a situation where that sector becomes attractive for the youth as a means of employment? Please.
Okay, so I hear all you unions say that you also not tolerate a freeze on public sector employment. Okay, but Dr. Santiano, let me bring you in here. And I assume that you agree with that position, correct? I assume that you agree with that position that, I mean, don't agree to a freeze on public sector employment. Am I correct, Dr. Santiano?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's ask the next hard question. Something must definitely give because our debt level is unsustainable. We're asking for a bailout because we are frankly broke. You say, okay, don't freeze employment. Okay, then we have to raise revenue. And Dr. Titus, but you make the point. Raise revenue. Government today issued a statement giving us a sense of what they might do to raise additional revenue as part of the program with the IMF. One, I'm quoting, additionally, other tax measures could be considered for the medium term. Are workers prepared to pay more taxes? Dr. Santiano?
Well, if you talk about tax, I think my colleagues here will agree that we are one of the highest paying. Some are paying as much as 30% of their income. So that's not a question.
I'm not talking about, government says additional, so not what you are paying already. Government says...
I'm making a point.
Okay.
So it's not really about, you see, because I think from your presentation, everything is about money, everything is about revenue. my colleagues have highlighted that you have various aspects. For example, you left out leakages. There are other reports and other data that we have seen that there is so much also going into leakage in the system, which, I mean, it's also an important factor. So already the worker is burdened. From your graphs and your tables, it's clear that what we have to spend is even not enough. So to say that you are going to cover all public workers with a tax, it means that you really want to burden the public worker, which is not the way to go.
But Dr. Santana, let me ask you this question. I need to be frank with you. So you say you want your COLA, no questions asked. Don't freeze employment. Okay, I mean, then government says, okay, but we are in a crisis. IMF will certainly say, as they've said today, consider additional tax to you say that will burden us. So what will give?
So that's why my colleague talked about productivity. When we went to Kwewu, it was already clear that we need to make more from our production system. And so, Mr. Kabonu said, I mean, if you use money for other programs, it's all generated as expenditure. But that is not coming to Utag, that is not coming to GMA, that is not coming to NAT or Nagrat. So we need to sit down. That's why we also stated that we need homegrown solutions and we need sustainable measures which would prevent us from going back. But when we look at revenue, as you have highlighted, and only taxes, then I can also confidently assure you that even the workers to work, there will be a time that they will be so much agitated that you will not have any productivity.
Okay.
So we need to look at it as a country. We need to come up with measures which is nationality and not only for 4 years for Party A or for Party B. That is the way to go. Otherwise, the cycle is going to continue.
Titus, are you ready to pay more taxes, as government has indicated today as part of their IMF program that they will consider additional tax measures? Are you ready to pay more taxes?
I think the entire country is ready to pay taxes that are well thought through, but not taxes that are heaped on the already overtaxed persons. We know that the number of people actually paying taxes in this country are very few. Governments have been advised severally widen the tax net. They go for the lazy man's approach of taxing the already taxed persons. I am very taxed. We made noise about e-levy and other forms of taxation that, look, bring in very innovative taxes that ropes in a lot more people.
Okay.
People are doing business that are taking money cash here and there and paying nothing. No salary of mine comes to me without any tax. Even if I did any private job, and I want to emphasize it, any doctor who does any private job in any hospital, withholding taxes are taken before the person is paid, because we are in a formal sector. So we are already paying. Okay. I will welcome taxes that rope in the untaxed. And that is the hard nuts that people are elected as governors and our representatives to work and bring out. Okay. Not to bring out a basic system that everybody can just think without even any struggle. Okay. If we just come and impose another tax on the people on the payroll, what have we gained?
Okay.
What have we gained?
Dr. Titus Bayu, Angel Kabonu, Dr. Santiano, thank you very much. Tomorrow morning, the real work begins. The IMF team are landed tonight. Well, let's see what they get. Let's see what the picture looks like when when government says they will update us. So we'll get a picture of what they're trying to do and how that affects workers. Tomorrow, I'll have another conversation. Enjoy the rest of the evening.